Oh, okay. Well, hello everybody. Nice to meet you. My name's Chris Lomas. I'm product director here at Oliver Wyman, responsible for the delivery of the product that you're going to see and we're going to talk about. To save on intros, Jonathan Graham's with us. He's a product manager and responsible for the client side of delivery, and Rainer is partner, co-head of the European data analytics practice and godfather of the product. The sort of the founding brain behind Newstrack, and he'll come into play a little bit later on. What we wanted to do today was to start this conversation around sales activation with you about the Factiva sentiment signals product. Sincere apologies if I ever refer to it as Newstrack. We've got this name stuck in our head over the last 9 months, and we are doing our best to change gears on that to the new product name that we agreed a few weeks ago. So if I ever misspeak, I apologize for that, but that's why. The point of today, I think, is to give you a sense of the product, the purpose, the why, and then also to allow you to ask questions. The sorts of things that we want to cover with you today. Hopefully this will be a sort of meeting the needs of you all in this session. Is, why bother? What is this new product about? Who's it for? We'll give you some headlines in terms of the sorts of names, job descriptions that you might be looking for in your black books. We'll give you an overview of how it works. We can go as deep as you want to into that, but we've prepared something that's probably at a decent level, and then if people want to go deeper and ask more technical questions after a demo, I'm sure we can do that. We'll provide you with a demo so you can see the platform live. We can explain some of the features and functionality in there, and then we'll go into some of the evidence that we have for why it works. We'll take you through a number of different case studies, a few of the different use cases, so that you can start to get into, okay, what kind of client, what kinds of problems might they have that we want to align with. And of course, we'll talk a little bit about how your clients can get access, be that for a trial period or be that in terms of a subscription, and of course, what the sort of the costs and the commercials are that are around that. We also want to make sure that we leave plenty of time for questions at the end, so please do save those. If you have a burning question throughout, of course, please feel free to interrupt. Otherwise, be assured that there will be time for that at the end. I also know that Rainer has to go after on the hour, so hour-ish. So we want to try and make sure that we get through the content, and then we can speak about some of the questions and things afterwards as well. So why this new product? What we've been able to create together as the two entities coming together is a product that can accurately predict future and unseen risk events, things that humans may miss or simply don't have the capacity to be on top of, frankly. And so, as you know, the purpose of this product is to take in news feeds from Dow Jones, and then we pass that through a data science pipeline that we'll get into, and out of that comes a signal that predicts that there is going to be a risk event. That can be extremely meaningful for companies in a number of different use cases, which we'll come onto on the next slide. And we've seen that those sorts of risks detected from news can be detected 3 to 6 months ahead of time. So, I mean, if you imagine speaking to any of your clients and saying, I can tell you that there's going to be a risk event 3 to 6 months ahead of it happening, as opposed to you encountering it when it happens, I'm sure all of them would be very grateful. The main value proposition that we have that makes us different and that makes us stand out is these 5 things. So firstly, the real-time and automated component of this. So imagine your client has, say, even just 1,000 entities or companies, clients of theirs or significant entities, part of their value chain that they're trying to keep a track of. Now imagine that they have a risk team that's maybe 2, 3, even 6 or 10 people, trying to stay on top of all of the news sources, all of the key financials that they might need to across just a portfolio of 1,000 companies, and being able to spot all the risk across that would be nigh on impossible. And what we've done is created a pipeline that takes in all the news information from all the different news sources that Dow Jones has. And on a real-time basis, or I should say near real-time basis, every 15 minutes, we process any new news stories. And on an automated basis, we can alert clients of Factiva sentiment signals as a product to risks in their portfolio. The other thing is that this is real time in the sense that as news breaks, you don't need to wait for the investor relations announcement or wait for the year-end accounts or quarterly accounts in order to know that there's an issue on the balance sheet, or that there's a particular detail in the executive summary of their report that they're trying to hide. This is coming out in real time. So it's real time and it's automated. The second piece is it's objective and transparent. So in a lot of these sorts of products, what you'll find is that they'll tell you that there's a risk, but they can't explain it or tell it to you in a way that it passes the granny test. I like to call it the granny test. So can my granny understand what the problem is, right? And so what we've built into the FSS product is these transparency tools, whereby they're able to see what the score is of a particular entity, but then they can dive down and they can see what the themes are that are underlying that score. And then they can see the articles that contribute towards that, and they can read those all there. They can sort and filter in different ways by the articles that have been considered that are most driving towards this sentiment of the score, right? So they can say, right, which ones are the ones that are most negative? Which ones are the ones that are most positive? What are the themes that are being pulled out of all of this body of articles? So you can quickly get a clear understanding of what the main issues are that are at play in the score consideration. Thirdly, it's comprehensive in the sense that we cover all news coded companies that Dow Jones has. That includes a bunch of private and obviously public traded companies. And we have access to all of the underlying news at the moment in English speaking languages. That's not the full extent of what the ambition is. And indeed, if you get people saying, we'd like this in other languages, we'd be very interested to hear which those are. But at the moment, the tool's set up for English language, but very comprehensive in terms of the coverage. So it's not Eurocentric, US-centric. It's truly global in the sense of any news coded company that Dow Jones has news for. The combination of our capabilities is unique as well, in the sense that the global nature of the news coverage and the sort of the superpower of all of the different outlets that Dow Jones Factiva brings together in terms of the news sources is backed by decades, 40 years plus of Oliver Wyman experience in risk and analytics, and the combination of the latest in artificial intelligence, large language models, and that combination is also unique. And as we've been going around over the last 9 months and speaking to people, they've said, yeah, we've tried this, but we've not been able to succeed. And we've tried doing natural language processing, we haven't succeeded. And I think mainly that's because those companies, those clients that we've been speaking to, just simply don't have the capacity. So when we come on to talking about the pricing as well, I think one of the key selling features here is that the entry price for this is relatively low compared to the amount of effort, time, experience, and ongoing maintenance it would take to be able to have such a product built within a company that's, well, frankly, any company, but particularly outside of a top 20 global corporation or financial institution. And then, of course, we can evidence that this thing works. So we can talk to the fact that companies where this has been embedded speak about material reduction in losses that they would experience with a product like this, or uplifts in investment returns, or a reduction in their risk-weighted assets that they need to set aside, which of course all benefits the overall operation. So who's it aimed at? We've got really three main use cases, and they are around credit risk, so being able to spot credit risk in a portfolio. So whether it's having outstanding debtors or wanting to commit more in terms of lending. Investment portfolio management, so the optimization of investment practices. And frankly, as we spoke to one investment professional, he said, I don't really care whether the company's going up or going down. I just want to know so that I can understand where the risk is, and then obviously make my trade. So they're very compelling, I think, in that space as well. And we'll show you an example of that. And then a number of companies have started to speak to us as well about value chain, supply chain monitoring. And particularly this has come through in the automotive sector, where you might imagine this to be true, where, if you have some upstream manufacturer and they're starting, if we start to see issues with a supply of parts, say, for example, then you'd want to know that pretty early on so that your supply chain doesn't break down. So that's another interesting use case that we're seeing. Also, we haven't listed it here as a main one that we've seen, but we have seen some things around in the insurance sector around being able to sell clients insurance around particular risk events that they may come up, that may be coming up for them. So monitoring the news on a particular entity, and then being able to sell them insurance ahead of time of an event coming up. So then we have sort of the different buyers and users. So the buyers that we typically find are Chief Risk Officer, Chief Financial Officer, Chief Investment Officer. And the typical users are going to be this credit risk type analyst, leads of credit risk teams. Perhaps you hear people talking about early warning systems, and therefore the teams involved in that. Perhaps on the more investment side of things, the investment analysts or portfolio managers, senior portfolio managers. So those are typically some of the names that we would be looking out for if we're looking for good people to have conversations with. Interestingly, we also started on a series of introductions quite early on with specifically the sort of the data and analytics people, so the people that are responsible for the methodology of these sorts of systems. And we wanted to say that those are probably not the kind of people that you want to talk to, because they typically don't have the buying intention. They probably are there to learn. They're probably there to take whatever they can get from it, but are probably of the mindset that they could build something similar. Even if they cannot, they're there to basically take our time and to essentially listen and learn, but not likely to buy as much as some of these other personas that are more interested in a product. And then the sorts of companies that we're finding that we're getting particular traction with are the financial institutions, insurance companies, asset management companies. And typically what we find is that the ones that are in the sort of what you might call the top 20 globals, again, have that attitude of, oh, this is very interesting. Yeah, we've been trying to do something like this. We'd be interested in a trial. We'd be interested in hearing your presentation. But then in the end, they go away and say, actually, in parallel, we've been talking to 2 or 3 other things, and we've been trying to build something ourselves. And so actually, we're going to go at this alone. And so they typically believe that they can attempt this sort of thing themselves. So typically, it's just below those top 20 type FIs where we've seen more traction. Okay, I might just pause there a second. If there's any questions about particularly the value proposition or who it's aimed at, and then before we get talking a little bit more about the product itself and how it works. Any questions at all?
Chris, one from me before you continue. Can you put presentation mode later?
I can. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
This is from Ezra here. I mean, you talked about supply chain monitoring. Are you going to cover the different types of risks that the solution covers?
Yes, we'll get into that a little bit after the demo.
Perfect. Thank you.
Cool. Okay. I'll carry on then. Let me advance the slide here. So in terms of how it works, so essentially we take in all of the news. This is obviously relatively simplified, but without going into loads and loads of depth, we wanted to give you an overview of the whole thing. So essentially the news comes in. Obviously there is a cleaning process. There is a process to filter out the relevant articles, to clean some of the text. And then we come into the real data science pipeline, which is transforming that news data into a readable signal. We create the embeddings and then process those to combine all the embeddings and to get a view for each individual company, and then generate that signal. And then from that, we go out into the interfaces, where we represent the score. We generate essentially the graphics, the time series of the score, and then the different themes and filters that we have. It's worth saying that this is basically up until about the end of the gray box. There's lots of gray boxes. Up until the end of the biggest gray box is really all sort of behind the scenes, as it were. And then what the client experiences is really either the web app that you'll get to see, or they could request an API that they could then use within their own environment. So we recognize that the web app has been incredibly helpful in terms of making it real to people, but they will likely have their own early warning system. And some of the feedback that we've had has been, this is great, but what we'd like to do is embed this within our own systems. Do you have an API? And then obviously that's where that API comes in. So
and just on the central gray box, I think this is obviously the area where I think the central capability lies as well. Right, and coming back to the earlier comment, I think the model is trained to monitor, anticipate any issues around the respective entity, right? Because the train label was basically say, what are the issues? What are the potential drivers of an entity being downgraded or an entity defaulting? And from the various tests we ran, we can clearly see that the tool itself is picking up on a very broad notion of risk, right? So it is not credit only. It is touching upon, we did test against Wirecard, Greensill, Silicon Valley Bank, and all these things where, of course, you could not train it explicitly, but you can clearly see that the model is anticipating those issues. And therefore, I think the model prediction is not restricted to credit risk, for example, only. Yeah, and I guess where this is coming from, and Chris made that comment on the earlier pages, it's the way the model is structured and the model has been trained, and it combines a lot of capabilities, right? So the richness of the Factiva news feeds, the cutting edge capabilities of the big transformer models and the large language models, and of course, some of the other Wyman expertise in terms of risk modeling and risk analytics.
Yep.
I had a quick question, Chris.
Yeah.
We're obviously very excited about both the web app and the API, but I think we do have a timing on the API. Is that available right now, or is that coming in a few months?
Yeah, that's a fair question. The API is in design and development now, so yeah, it's not currently available, but these contracting things take time, but we expect to have something like that before the end of the year.
Great, but the web app is based on our launch date of early September. That will be what everyone can jump into immediately.
Yeah, exactly. in terms of the API, so that's something that we're working on with Dow Jones, and Dow Jones will be the front facing sort of client facing element of that. So everything would work in the same ways as you're used to in terms of the sales process of selling those data feeds essentially to your clients already. Yep. Okay. Great. So why don't we make this real for you and just give you a sense of the platform here. So can you see? Yeah, you should be able to see that. So all I've done here is, and this is a application that is fully responsive. So if you wanted to see this on mobile, or if you wanted to see it on a tablet, it's fully capable of all of that, as you would expect in modern web development. And what we have here is the portfolio of a company. So what I mean by that is a group of companies or entities that your client is interested in. They can obviously personalize this. They can search for any of the news coded companies that are in the Factiva news coded database, and they can add those to their portfolio. If they wanted to, they could give us a list of companies that they wanted to preload. So say they've got 1,000 companies or more that they wanted to start with for everybody, say, that again, that's feasible and possible. And essentially, they can go in here and search for anything, and then they can find those companies here, and they can go into a particular company's page. And what we see here on 3M is that it was all going well, and then somewhere in April 19, a signal started to appear that things were not going so well. And as you can see then in March 20, we got the announcement of a particular downgrade event. Now, I think the whilst these events are interesting, they're probably more interesting in the past, as we've been demoing this to clients and saying, look, the signal got going earlier, 6 months ahead of time before the event happened. Actually, in the future, obviously, those events are not there in the future, and so the line really is about: is there a movement that is happening that I should be interested in and concerned about? And so the level of sensitivity to this downgrade score will obviously vary depending on who the company is, what industry they're in, but what they're looking for is a movement. And what we see here is the volume of news articles that was being considered at each point. And here we can see obviously a growth in particularly negative articles that had a negative sentiment in being considered for this score. And then below here are the articles themselves, in this case, initially filtered on the most recent articles. But like I was saying to you earlier about being able to go deeper and to explore, we can look at which ones are the ones that were most negative. So here we see about shareholder losses, we see about lawsuits, and then we might say, what are the influential themes? So here we can see about price targets, underperforming ratings. We can see against legal proceedings, exactly the kinds of things that we might expect to be seeing based on the articles that we just saw. And then we can filter on other things like positive news, for which there's not very much, or negative news, of which there is quite a lot. So that gives you a sense. And okay, of course, we can go in for any of these. We can go in and see the actual article that obviously is coming through Dow Jones, and we can read that article here in the platform. So there's no need for the client to go anywhere else. Yeah.
Hey Chris, can you do this?
Filter on particular time ranges. Yeah.
Can you initiate the searches or the alerts at like a security level instead of the issuer? So if I'm a portfolio manager and I have a list of bonds, I could give you the QSIP numbers or CDOL numbers, and that can kind of trigger this.
So, sorry, Dave, just run that by me one more time.
So in financial services, if you're you know, a trading desk at Bank of America trading bonds, right? They'll have
Yeah.
the underlying security of the issuer, and they'll track it at the QSIP level or the CDOL level. And it ties all back to the issuer. It's not bond specific, but they have thousands of portfolios of bonds where when you want to like a list view, you'd be able to kind of upload it that way, as opposed to just the issuer.
I can
So
answer
like
that.
a lot of times, like if you're like a Bloomberg customer or a Thomson Reuters client, a fixed income desk will set up alerts for news to just say, is there a potential upgrade or downgrade of the issuer? That's all they get. This is something that you're kind of taking it to the next level to kind of say what news is being alerted and why it could potentially be going there. Just workflow and make their lives a hell of a lot easier.
Okay.
Dave, I think what we would have to do there is preload those companies so we can map our news to
Right.
CDOL and QSIP. So in that case,
Yeah.
if the customer says we have 1,000 QSIPs or 1,000 CDOLs, we would behind the scenes take that list and map it to our
Okay.
Factiva news code. So we could do that, but we'd preload
Okay.
that. So we couldn't do it in here in the product.
Right.
It's
Got it. Thank you.
sure.
Great. So yeah, so in and of itself, I suppose the product is intentionally, relatively simple in terms of its layout, in terms of the different things that are here. It's hopefully intuitive to navigate. Certainly, that's the feedback that we've had. And I don't know if anybody has any questions about something that we've shown that you didn't understand.
I have a quick question around entity resolution. Is that still going to be done manually up front, or is the system doing it automatically?
Yeah, Ed, thank you. So the only companies that they can add are companies that they're able to search for. So by virtue of the fact that the search is linked to the list of news coded companies that Dow Jones has, there's no manual matching here.
How would customers know news coded versus not?
I guess by searching, and if they can't find it, I guess they would have to come and ask Dow Jones support. I don't know, Susan, if you've got a different answer to that. But
Yeah, I was gonna say, so in here, in theory, any company that is in our news, right, is coded. So in the search, when they're adding their lists, they'll get through that 300,000, but if it's not in there, and that includes aliases, that includes any companies that might be mapped. But if it's not, so let's say it's a smaller company, it's not news coded yet, they'll be, we'll direct them to put a form in to give us feedback, and we can news code that company. But remember, these signals are driven off news volume. So if the company doesn't have sufficient news coverage, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, I believe that's 25 articles in 6 months, give or take.
Yeah.
You can create a score. So yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine how that works for like a one-time screening, but when you have an ongoing monitoring, it's very possible that companies go dormant for a while and then something happens.
yeah, so we have a status, Ed, which is no score available. So it might be that they add them to the portfolio, but there's no score for that period, or there has been a score in the past, but there's now no score. So I can show you what that would look like. So here, this is the next version. Yeah, here. So here's a period where there would be insufficient news volume, and so we would show them a score for the period. This is obviously not a real company, so this is very unlikely to be as bad as this. But you can see here where you'd see a score, and then there might be a drop where they don't see a score, and then there'd be a score again. And so what we would see on the dashboard that would be different would be for the particular point in time where they're looking at the dashboard, they might see no score here. but they'd see that when they click in, they'd see that there was a score at some point in the past. Does that make sense?
Yep. Thanks.
And also, I think it's very important to point out. I mean, I do point this out with Factiva customers as well, is if we don't have a news code for somebody, it's because there is not enough news. Even if we created a code for them, it wouldn't really be useful at all, because there's very, very little news for that company. So, I mean, it's not that by coding more companies that would make this any more useful.
Right. And how is it, with the 300,000, do we know what percentage is private company versus public? Because I mean, it's got to be hard to get this for private companies, I would think.
Yeah, so we have all listed companies, pretty much 60,000 or so are news coded in Factiva. We code them even regardless of news coverage. So our rule is to code every listed company. And then we have the rest are all private, unlisted companies. So about 200,000, 200.
And then, sorry, I was walking to work when the call just started, but where in the product does it kind of give you an overview of the methodology to create the score? Is there some help feature that would tell you what moderate means, like what we did?
Yeah. So we have this, and actually I'll show you this in the new version because it's a bit more extensive in here. So we've like a brief overview of actually this is not the latest version of the language, but there's a more extensive explanation that we can send you a copy of as well if you'd like, Dave. But here's a sort of an explanation of the score and how it's broken down. But in the next version of this, there is a deeper explanation of how the score works and what does no score mean, and all of that sort of thing that we think people would want to know. So we've revised that.
And can you also, I mean, this is showing downgrades. Can you invert it and say, like, what are upgrades? What are potential upgrades?
I'll let Rainer answer the question.
Well, I think implicitly it is encoded in a green label, right? So the green ones are very strongly correlated to upgrades. But at this stage, there is no explicit prediction. The model is trained to capture the negative events, which by inversion means it's reacting to positives as well, but it's not yet optimized to do so, right? But if we can see from the examples that a low signal or a very low signal means there's a high probability of, or a higher probability of a upgrade happening. And we've been doing those tests using this version of the model for investment portfolios, where I've been simulating the potential performance uplift if you reshuffle a certain allocation or trading strategy. And this includes also impact elements from anticipating upgrades. So it works, it does the job, even though there could be in the future a model that is even doing better regarding the upgrades.
Got it.
Cool.
And do we see competitors doing this? I mean, is there anybody out in the market? I mean, I heard earlier that, it's kind of maybe proprietary, that, like a B of A or a Goldman Sachs is doing something like this, but is there any vendor out there doing this to the best of your knowledge?
And I think not to the best of our knowledge. And I think it has three main reasons. One is the explainability part. So what the model does is not giving you an obscure sentiment score. The model is able to explain itself, which I think is pretty unique. Then second element is it does not require financial information or market data. So it works for the private entities as it does for the public ones, which is also not the case for most of the solutions out there. And that's something I think it's worth explicitly mentioning. The amount of information that comes with the model prediction is tremendous, right? But it's not only a score, it is the full information behind, right? You can get the access to the full Factiva news sources, news items related to these entities. which I think is pretty impressive. And this is something we got really positive feedback on. And as Chris mentioned, also pricing wise, I think this is really efficient compared to other offers out there.
How does this stack up against models that are using financial data?
It can be, and that's something like a lot of clients are looking into. It can be integrated with models that are using financial data, and that's work we have been doing, for example, with Deutsche Bank. We say, how can we use news feeds and modern NLP techniques to improve our existing risk assessment approaches, right? So it's supposed to give you an additive signal, a signal that's reacting at real time and is not supposed, or doesn't have to wait for publication of financial statements. And it definitely has an efficiency lever as well to say, well, in theory, would have to monitor all these news sources manually. That's not something we can do with a justifiable effort, right? Therefore, there's a component that says it is additive to existing models, and it's definitely a efficiency lever for risk assessment purposes or investment-related use cases.
I think the main thing, though, that to kind of hone in there is that what Rainer said about you would have to have real-time feeds of all the companies' fundamentals and financials in order to have the same real-time signal, which I don't think many people publish all of that until you get to quarterly or annual statements, right? So that's why this is a different kind of signal that's real-time.
And I think one
I'm
other
interested,
thing.
sorry, what does Deutsche Bank using for their news source? They're not using Factiva, are they?
Well, I'm not sure whether they are using Factiva for some purpose, but at this stage, to my knowledge, they're not using Factiva for exactly this topic.
Okay.
There's one thing that Rainer mentioned as well, and it goes to Ezra's question, that this would be additive. I think the exciting part of this is it's different enough from what banks and other organizations are doing to monitor credit risk, that it is a unique signal off of unique data that isn't really present in the other ways these organizations are doing it today. So we're not necessarily here to displace anyone, but add a new layer of intelligence to the equation, which I think is great. It's not you buy the financial data one or this. This is another layer of predictive analysis that can enhance what they're doing currently. So I think that's really great.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, so Rainer, I'm going to hand over to you, and I'm going to talk about some of the ROI success stories and some of the specific use cases and examples that we've seen.
Yeah, happy to. Shall we? I think they're summarized on the left-hand side here, right? I mentioned the first one already. We have been testing that solution with a insurance firm that said, can we simulate the impact that using NewsTrack or Factiva sentiment signal, apologies, would have had if we have been using it as informing factor in our investment strategy. What we could identify and realize in this real world example is NewsTrack or Factiva sentiment signal would have given them an uplift in return of around 200 basis points and even more. So this is a central use case. How can you use FSS to improve an investment strategy and a portfolio management process? The second test we did is in the credit space, where we ran a similar exercise with, and this is actually going back to the OCBC example, where we ran NewsTrack and generated a NewsTrack FSS prediction for their portfolios, and they did the impact assessment themselves and came back with a statement that said, if we would have been using FSS in the past, it would have allowed us to save 10% or even more of our historical credit losses, which is massive. It's material. If you compare it to the cost of a subscription, This is really, really massive in terms of impact, right? And I think what this is connecting to is the 3 to 6 months on that page is really a leading signal. It is really leading any other information that's out there. That's why it can generate those impacts. And it's accurate in the sense of it's capturing most of the downgrade events or adverse events for entities with sufficient accuracy ahead of time.
Reiner, this is Nick here. With regard to those impacts, for those clients that want to see the actual study or the white paper, do we plan to have any of that published, or is it published?
We have a standard marketing deck that explains how the model works, that talks people through the key KPIs. It's probably not yet what you are after. I think this would be my opinion, that we collaborate together and really figure out what's the best way to present this.
Yeah.
Now that said, of course, we're not going to disclose the full methodology behind this, right?
Right.
But we can explain like structurally how it works. We are explaining what are the differences. As I said, I think definitely there's room to tailor it more for your needs going forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and this, I think there's an example page now on Wirecard and also Silicon Valley Bank. I think the comments I wanted to make here is, and I did this earlier already, FSS was, of course, we could not train it to anticipate Wirecard explicitly. We could not train it to anticipate things like Silicon Valley Bank. But what you can see from this page and the next one is really it is able to anticipate and identify singular events. So things like Wirecard, that you could argue it's not directly credit, it's more frauds. The model was not trained explicitly, but still you can see from the signal that ahead of the event with sufficient lead time, it was alerting the user. It would have been alerting the user of something happening and something likely to be happening around Wirecard, right? So pretty much the same effect you can see on the Silicon Valley page, where by tracking the signal over time, you can see that starting from, I don't know, late stages 21, there's a continuous increase in the downgrade signal that FSS was providing. Also, this a clear confirmation that the model is picking up on things that are unique and singular and exceptional, right? Beyond the traditional rating downgrades, credit events happening. I think the same applies to, if we can navigate back to the previous page, just quickly, Chris. We did test around COVID-19 and the impact of which the recall figure of 70%. So the statement that the model and the FSS solution was anticipating 70% of the COVID-19 driven credit events is an impressive number if you factor in that this is based on news only. And this is a way how some clients have been using the entity level prediction to really inform their sector level risk assessments. To say we understand at entity level who might be more or less affected by COVID-19, the COVID crisis. There are similar experiments against the background of the cost and energy crisis to inform a sector level early warning framework as well, right? So we sometimes get the questions, is that do you bake in sector level indicators? We do, but this is coming from the nature of the model, that the model itself, how it's been trained is reading off from the different information of entities in individual sectors. So you can derive sector level predictions and sector level early warning signals from the tool as well if wanted, but the tool itself gives you a way more granular prediction and a more granular capability. Yeah. OCBC I mentioned, and I think a nice element in there is the impact assessment was done by the client themselves, right? So we gave them a variant of the FSS output, and they recalculated their provisions and came back with saying, hold on, guys, this is really cool. Would have been saving us a lot of money in the past, right?
When we're talking to clients, can we say that these firms are using this service, like OCBC or Deutsche Bank or anything like that? Or is it just like one-off individuals that are part of the pilot?
Well, I think it's a tricky question. So we as Oliver Wyman have permission from OCBC and Deutsche explicitly to name our joint work. For example, we don't have permission to tell a public audience that they are using these type of solutions, right? So I think that's probably something we need to work out together going forward, how we can provide testimonials and reference client names. But strictly speaking, we need to be cautious around naming these entities towards third-party audience.
Sure.
Yeah, I think this one I covered already, Chris. Let's experiment based on a insurer's investment portfolio, where we just simulated basically what performance uplift FSS would have given them. And this is where the 200+ basis points from the previous pages is coming from. Chris, I think you're on mute.
Please. Thank you, Rainer. Any questions for Rainer before we move on to sort of access and pricing?
Yeah, this is Ezra. Could you sort of describe how much of a turnkey system this is?
Yeah. So the access, getting access is relatively simple. 1 or 2 days probably to get access, Ezra, after contracting, to get access to the web app. And then I think from there on in, it's pretty self-serve. There's no like intervention required. For the API, that'll come in the future. I think that would be similar to some of the other data feeds that you have at the moment, but there'll be thorough and full documentation, obviously, on developer.dowjones, and then support available for that as well.
Okay. So it seems like the work involved, aside from the contracting, giving them access to the portal, would be really aligning the F codes to their portfolio, getting the having them either themselves get the F codes, or we do an exercise where we F code their list of companies.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. So if there is a requirement to preload a list of companies, then it just depends on what those companies are. There might be some matching process that we need to do in order to find those and make sure and verify that they are indeed news coded. So that might take, I don't know, I guess, in fact, I'll let Susan speak to that, because that would be outside, outside of my team's remit.
Sure. No, I know that Susan's team has a great process of matching F codes to companies. Once they're matched, is there a bulk upload process where we can just take like a spreadsheet of all of the F codes and just load them into the web portal?
Yeah. So what we do is we can essentially in the product we'll be able to assign companies to a particular user group or individual users, so that they all have that set of companies. So as soon as we have the list of news coded companies, then we can just assign those to that user group.
Perfect. Thank you.
Of course.
Okay. You want me to take this one, Chris?
Please.
Okay. All right. So getting your clients access. So we're working on various ways to get your customers access and ways to trial this with your customers. So right now, as you know, I think many of you know, we've been in a pilot program since I think February at this point, working with Ed McMahon, a couple of his clients. We've had some really good feedback from some of these customers. So the pilot program is closing out as we head into August. We're moving towards pushing customers to take a 2-week trial. So we have a 2-week trial process that is available today, totally free, but the customer just gets static data like that Chris showed you earlier. And they'll see just a test set of companies, about a couple hundred companies, and we can give them access to a couple of users. So that is available today. If you have any customers that want to look at that, please reach out to me and Chris Lomas, and we can get that going. But there will be a formal form linked from Salesforce where you can request a trial for your customers. The other way, I'm going to skip over the pilot because we're closing that out. And the early access program, which I'll call the evaluation, that will pivot into when we get past August to an 3-month evaluation or paid trial. So that is meant for customers that don't want to commit to a full 12-month access, but want to trial the product for 3 months and get a preview of real scores for their portfolio. So an example might be, so it's similar to Factiva Analytics in that we won't give away free trials for this, except for static data. If they want real data, but they're not ready to commit to the 12 months, they can go through this program. And right now we're calling it early access because we can give access right now, pretty much right now, for 3 months until we have the full product. End of August. So end of August, we're calling a GA launch in September, but really we'll be ready with what we're calling version 2.0, which is with the real-time data. They can buy, and I think there's a update here, but the user will get, there is a limitation, and depending on what they contract, but they can buy 5, 10, 20 enterprise number of users. They can have 100 all the way to the unlimited universe, which will be 300,000. So the starting price, and I think that's on the next slide, will be at 100 companies. I think this is showing the old slides, but this has changed slightly. But on the right here, I'll just start with the 100. You can see, as Chris mentioned earlier, we've got pretty low introduction pricing at 30,000 a year for 100 companies. So the pricing is based off of number of entities and with a minimum number of seats that they get. If they want additional seats, there's additional pricing for that. It's not shown here. And then if they want to come in at that only 3-month commitment, there is a price. It's a little bit less than this. I think it's around 10,000 for 3 months for the first price and 15,000 for 250 entities. Any questions on the pricing so far? What we believe, and again, from our pilot customers, a lot of these customers, credit risk departments are coming in around 1,000. So they need to track about 1,000 credit risk departments entities. So that's the 96,000 price.
Hey, Susan, do we have paperwork for the customer now? Do we have like some kind of trial agreement or even contractual for them? Or is it, you mentioned pilot, so it's still
just
no
the
paper.
pilot and the 2-week trials as of today. We're working with Letitia's team, Larry, to get the what we're calling the evaluation agreement, which will be the 3-month contract and then the full 12-month contract. We can't do that till we have our long-term agreement with Oliver Wyman signed. So that's coming in the next few weeks. So I'd say by mid-August, when we have V 2.0, we should have all the contracts in place. But today, immediately, we do have a 2-week trial. It doesn't require any signatures. The customer just has to opt in and check a box. And then it's similar to the Factiva trials, 2-week trials. You can set it up. So right now, just email me, myself and Chris, if you have a customer that just wants to take a 2-week trial, that doesn't require any paperwork. But we will ask you to add an opportunity in Salesforce.
Yeah, Susan, one thing I'd
Thank you.
ask, that we should consider, most of our contracts are 2-year terms. So to go out of the gates with a 1 year, that's kind of opposite of everything we do. So maybe you say it's a 2-year commitment, you got a 3-month evaluation, and after that 3 months, you're locked into the 2 years.
Okay. I'll talk to, so I'm working closely with Lisa on the contracts.
Okay.
So that's a really good, that's a good idea. And we did get some feedback too about this pricing. It was pretty much right, like spot on from Zurich. Actually, it's similar to S&P and Moody's offerings start at 40, like 40 to 70,000. So this is slightly lower. But yeah, that's not a
Is there anything, if there any consideration, like, so say these, 5 users, they have 100 securities they're looking at. Is there language in the contract that they can't share it beyond those 5 users, like internally? Because what if they download something and they say, hey, here are 100 issuers now that we think are at risk, and they're going to tell the whole firm?
Yeah, so we'll have standard language that we have in the Factiva contracts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But this is great, Susan. Nice and simple, very simple pricing. Makes a lot of sense. We're not counting articles and other things. This is great.
Yeah.
Do you see more than 10? I see only 10. Is there 10 users? Is there like instances where that can
I think
grow?
this is an old version, but we do have a version where so I think there was another slide. I don't
Do you
know
want to
if
share, Susan?
I think Monica has, I should have it. Sure. It's just a little table that shows you, it's like reader pricing, if you will, right? I can open that up. Apologies, I don't have it ready, but let me see.
So
That was our
basically,
last slide.
just for additional users, there would just be an additional add-on price that you'd add on to that.
Exactly. So the thresholds here we go. I have it up. Can you see that? So if you go beyond the additional users, it's a pretty low price. We just wanted it, and that's kind of like, we thought about this also with the API, right? When we get, and the API pricing will be similar to this, if not the same, because it really is just based off of volume of companies, right? Not off of usage, because the articles are coming back behind the score, right? So they're not getting the whole archive of Factiva. They're just getting it for those companies that they purchased. So we based this off of, so we said, okay, most of the departments have 10 or 15. We're noticing there's about 10 or 15 credit risk analysts. So we kind of base it off, okay, a single department, but then, there may be cases where they want, okay, I want to give this to another group or another group. So we wanted to make sure we covered that, if you will, reader pricing. And so this is the additional pricing that I was referencing. Any questions on the pricing? Nope. Okay. I think that was our last slide, right?
Yeah, so I think what we wanted to do was just open up, discuss anything else that you wanted to discuss. And I think maybe encourage some conversation about how we go to market together as well. The approach that we've been taking so far has been a sort of, either companies, Dow Jones with their clients or Oliver Wyman with their clients might have a introductory meeting, and then once that introductory meeting has happened, then we're basically together after that. So Oliver Wyman is very happy to support any sales conversations with Dow Jones in a second meeting. They wanted to go deeper on the methodology, what's it good for, the different use cases, all that kind of stuff, and vice versa. On an Oliver Wyman introduction, we'd bring in Susan or Monica and others into those conversations as we go forward. So
On the news that, this is Ezra again, on the news that you're using, are we just looking at all news for that F code, or is there a pre-filter designed by that? And then also, are you looking for specific topics, or is it really doing sentiment against just every article about that company?
So on the news question, Susan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the only filter that's applied is English language. Everything else we have.
Yes, so it's not the web content. So we've got it's the Factiva analytics content set.
Mm-hmm.
Is to about 10,000 or 14,000 plus filtered for English only.
Okay.
And Charlie's on, he set up the analytics feed for this model. So if correct me if I'm wrong, Charlie.
Nope, that's all correct.
Okay.
So it's not looking for specific types of events, like, like bankruptcy or capacities closure or labor issue. Sort of the AI is figuring all of that out by itself on the fly. And okay.
I'll let Rainer tell the champagne moment story.
All right.
Yeah, happy to. And I think it's perfectly right what just has been said. So the model is trained to really be universal. It was not given manually a labeling or a list of bad and negative topics. That's something the model was learning from the training process. To get to a point where we were able to do it was a bit of a walk, and the start of these type of models using transformers was with a project we did with Deutsche Bank. And there was a period where I thought I became a bit nervous, and I thought I might have been too bullish in saying we can do something meaningful, because the initial versions of that model were generating basically random noise, right? Because we had the ambition to say we don't want to filter, we don't want to manually impose our understanding of what's good and bad, but we want to build something that's proactively learning from what has been happening in the past. To get, as I mentioned, to get to this point was not simple. We had to work hard. We cracked the problem, and the moment we cracked it, the manager on this project was sending an email to the team with just a subject line that said, champagne is in order, we got signal. Yeah, it was not trivial, but it was an interesting exercise. Of course, we expanded quite a bit now on the way how we are filtering for the signal and how we're distilling the predictions. Again, I think that's one of the USPs, to say we don't need to filter manually. We don't need to put in certain topics and certain pre-labels. The model is able to learn this proactively and find the right signal.
Thank you.
Guys, can we talk about timelines in a little more detail, I guess, from now to launch? We want to get our RSDs and the general sales team fired up about this.
So probably I answer this. So first I wanted to train your teams, so say specialists, so you become ideally subject matter experts in no time. Idealistic, I know. But the idea is just, this is phase one. So this is the first training that you have. It's recorded, so you can see it on a later point. And the idea is that you now will receive from Susan, or will be reminded of your login details. And you hopefully will use the next 2 weeks to use the service of Factiva Sentiment Signal and raise more questions. So I will do a follow-up with Rainer and Chris in 2 to 3 weeks. So you can have another session where you can raise all the questions and all the things that bug you internally that you didn't have the opportunity to ask today. So you can do that, put a list together and ask Rainer and Chris yourself. The general account manager, so as the product is not officially launched yet, I'm under the belief that we should train general account managers on a later date. So I thought mid-September, because between August that everyone is on holiday and beginning of September where we have to set it up, we are going to create probably a wow session where we are inviting all the account managers, and probably we will do, this is phase 2, 2 weeks drop-in sessions on different times and dates. So if anyone has questions or want to see or want to be reminded, me and maybe someone from Oliver Ryman and Susan will be available to answer any questions or give a quick demo to anyone who wants it. So that's the plan.
And when will the sales play and pricing be on the intranet?
So it is in a draft stage already. I was waiting for some research for persona. So we are getting that soon. And once I have that, I will finish the draft and send it over to marketing and then design. So it will be soon. online, probably in August.
Great. And then the pricing will be found under Factiva Analytics pricing?
Yes.
It'll
It
be
will
another tab on that page.
Yeah, under integration prices, yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
I didn't
Any-
catch that. We're going to send demo versions to each of the specialists shortly, and then in 2 weeks, we'll hold a follow-up, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Not demo versions, like you have access to the web app.
Okay.
Yes.
We already have access, or is that coming?
Some of you have access. Sorry.
Okay.
Susan.
I was gonna say, some of you, I did set up access early on, the pilot version.
Okay.
But I think we have a new version, 1.5.
Good. Okay.
Has weekly score updates. So Chris and I will be in touch, and we'll send you, we'll look
Okay.
first. If anyone, basically anyone on this call will have access. If you could send me each of your teams, like anyone
will.
that's on this call, that'll be good.
Great. Thank you.
Cool. Okay. Anything else?
And just to confirm, I think I might have missed it. The API you're shooting for end of year or December, is that correct?
We hope so before the end of the year. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
And Ezra, one of the things we're talking about is, do we need a workflow API, or is this a stream, snapshot of all your portfolio? And that's what we're figuring out right now. What's the best way to go? Direction? Do we need both? Do we just start with a snapshot? So we're working through that with Dave and the engineering teams.
Okay.
Well, Chris Reiner and Jonathan, very clear value proposition. Yeah, we love how, I know certainly I love how you've tied this capability to solving real problems and to demonstrating that clients can get an advantage, whether it's a portfolio advantage or can potentially save millions of dollars. So we like how you tied that in. So thank you. It was very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone. And Monica's working very hard with marketing, with Oliver Wyman and others on the materials. Monica, I don't like product overview, pitch deck, etc. Monica, I don't know if you want to talk through that briefly.
So I'm under the belief that everything should be in one place. So I'm going to be doing one sales play with all the information linked in there. So you can just click on it and find how leads work from Oliver Wyman, what is exactly the flow chart that they did, what is the pricing will be there as well, how to find all the evaluation agreements, trial papers, all the things you need, how the opportunity should be tagged, important for us to monitor it. So everything will be in the sales play. The product overview, as I said, is in draft. So I will finish it and probably I will update it as you go in front of clients, we get more understanding and information about the persona, so we can update it on a continuous basis because this is a new product, as you know. So we didn't tap into that market before with this service in particular, so we have to learn as well. And I'm trying as well with Oliver Wyman to get someone who is in the credit risk space to talk to us in a WOW session in September, October as well. I'm also trying to do a certification process, so everyone has to be certified to sell it, as you know. That's why I'm doing this recording as well, so I get more material. And we are doing a few marketing campaigns. I'm trying to convince marketing to do a launch, probably in London, because Oliver Wyman is closer to here. but we are trying to see if we get budget and we can organize something a bit more spectacular to launch this service.
Monica, we'd also like to hold a webinar in September, if at all possible, with our experts from Oliver Wyman, and then maybe 3 other credit analysts or chief credit officers or portfolio managers, maybe hold a round table. And that's something that I'm sure each of the specialists could find a contact that could participate. So we'd love to do that in conjunction with the launch.
That would be great. If you can organize the skeleton of it, I'm sure marketing.
Yeah,
and
we
us-
did. I'll send it to you. I'll
Perfect.
send it.
And then using like BERT and GPT 3.4, that's a really hot topic with our customers right now. Will we have sort of a block diagram talking about the methodology that includes those terms as well that we could share with a customer? And the reason I ask for this is because a lot of people say, oh, what are you doing with, GPT 3 and 4? And so, large language models and so on and so forth. So that may be helpful.
Yes,
sure.
I think we definitely want to make sure we share documentation, make sure we run it through legal, that this is, we can show this, that we are allowed to use all this technology, all of that. So yeah, we definitely, that is a big piece that we anticipate getting questions on. So we will be pulling that together.
Okay. And specifically, I mean, basically, even if it's just a single slide, but a piece of slideware saying news goes in, GPT 3.4 BERT, proprietary models, then it pops out, just so customers can sort of understand that we are leveraging all of these, or Oliver Wyman's leveraging all of these, these technologies to get results.
Yep, we can certainly do that, Ezra.
Great, perfect, thank you.
So if there are no more questions, I close this off. Right.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
Christopher.
Great to
Thanks,
see you.
Monica.
Bye.